Okay, so this is going to be our exam 1 for accounting 2, which covers chapters 12, 13, and 14. This is the review with the problem side of it, so that's what we're going to be looking at. So we have about 11 problems that we're going to go through. My paper could be laid out in a little bit spaced out differently, but same concept as what you guys have on yours. So let's start with our first one. So it says that Sally and Les are forming a partnership. So remember, chapter 12 was partnerships. And it says that Sally invests in a building that has a market value of $250,000. The partnership accepts the $50,000 note secured by a mortgage on that building. Les invests $100,000 cash. So the partnership is receiving a building from Sally that has a market value of $250,000. Along with that, she has a loan on the building or a mortgage of $50,000 that she's bringing with that building. And then Les is bringing in $100,000 cash. So let's see what the entries look like. So the first one, it says, what does the entry for Sally's capital look like? All right, well, Sally's capital, the partnership is getting a building. So we're getting a building, so we're going to debit building. It's based off the market value, so that's $250,000. And then typically she would then get capital for that difference, but she's bringing in a debt. So we're going to also record that debt, notes payable, and we're going to credit the amount of the note, the $50,000. And that would mean that the amount of capital that Sally is getting is the difference between the two. So we're going to credit Sally capital for the difference between $250,000 and $200,000, or $200,000. So that's how much capital Sally is going to get. Now let's look at Les. Les's was a little simpler. Les just contributed cash. So under Les's, the partnership is getting cash, so we're debiting cash for $100,000, and we're crediting Les capital for $100,000. So that's where if we're looking at what does the entry for an investment in a partnership look like, if they have cash or assets other than cash, or if they bring in a liability with it. So we have examples of all of them. All right, let's look at number 2. So number 2 says that Kate, Alice, and Paul form a partnership. Kate contributes $150,000. Alice contributes $150,000, and Paul contributes $100,000. If net income is $90,000, what amount of net income does each partner get? So they have two scenarios. First is if income is divided equally, and then if income is divided by capital investment. So if income is divided equally, that means that each partner gets a third of it, right? There's 3 of them, so they each get a third. So each partner gets 1/3. And if we take 1/3 times $90,000 of income, then each partner is going to get $30,000 of that income. All right. The next one says, what if it's done by the capital investment? All right, well, let's look at we have to figure out how much total capital, and then we can figure out percentages of each of them. So total capital was $150,000 from Kate, plus $150,000 from Alice, plus $100,000 from Paul. So we get a total of $400,000 that was invested in the partnership. All right, so now we need to figure out what proportion do each of them get. So Kate, for hers, she has $150,000 of the $400,000. If we divide that out and take it one decimal place, Kate has 37.5% of the company. Alice actually invested the same amount as Kate, so the math is the same. $150,000 again divided by $400,000, and Alice also gets 37.5%, just like Kate does. Paul invested $100,000 and his out of $400,000, So he has a total of 25%. If you add the totals together, 37, just to double check it, 37.5 plus 37.5 plus 25, we do get 100. So that's what we want to make sure first. All right, now we can break it down their income. All right, so if we break it down by the capital investment, Kate gets 37.5% of that 90,000. So we multiply that out and she gets $33,750. Alice invested the same amount, so she gets 37.5% of that 90,000. So she also gets $33,750. And then Paul gets 25% of that $90,000. So he gets $22,500. So that's how we would break them down as far as what kind of income they have. So if there's no agreement, that means they all get divided equally. So we just divide by the number of partners and we split it. If they decide to do it by their capital investment, we have to figure out what percentage each of them own of the company. All right, let's look at number 3. Number 3 says that James and Blake form a partnership with capital contributions of $600,000 and $800,000 respectively. Their partnership agreement calls for James to receive $120,000 per year in salary, and also each partner is to receive 10% of the beginning contributions, with any remaining income or loss being divided equally. So we start out with net income of $270,000. So let's see what that looks like. All right. Well, we have net income that we have to disperse, and we have a total of $270,000 of net income. We did have a salary allowance for James, and I'm going to actually add a column so we can separate out by partner. So we have James and we have Blake. All right. So James gets a salary allowance of $120,000. Blake gets a salary allowance of 0. So that's subtracting out $120,000 from that $270,000. All right, the next thing they said was they get an interest allowance, which is 10% of their capital contribution. So 10% of James's is $600,000 times 10%, so $60,000. And 10% of Blake's, which was $800,000, 800,000 times 10% is $80,000. So that took out a total of $140,000. If we look at what do we have left, our balance of income, we had $270,000. We paid James $120,000. We paid the two of them their interest allowance at $140,000. That leaves a balance of $10,000 that they say they're going to split equally. So the balance is divided equally. So 10,000 divided by 2 is 5,000. So each of them are getting 5,000, and that's going to bring our balance down to 0. So we're subtracting out that 10,000 now. And our totals, we can add up, and James is getting a total of 185,000, and Blake is getting a total of 85,000. And we have 0 left to distribute, which is what we want to make sure we have. All right, so that shows us how to distribute if they have a salary allowance, an interest allowance, and they divide the remainder equally. If they had a loss, we would still do the exact same thing, and we would divide that loss equally. They still get that salary allowance, they still get that interest allowance, and then we divide that loss equally between them. All right, let's look at number 4. So number 4 says a corporation issues 6,000 shares of $5 par common stock for $8 per share. What is the entry? So what kind of entry would we do to issue stock that 6,000 shares that has a $5 par value, and we're issuing it for $8 per share? So we're issuing it above par, which is a premium. So we're debiting cash for the 6,000 shares times $8 per share. That's how much cash we're getting. So we're getting $48,000 in cash. And we're crediting common stock because we're issuing common stock. The amount we're using here is 6,000 shares times the $5 par value. So we're issuing common stock of 30,000. And the difference will go into paid in capital in excess of par. And the difference is 18,000 in that case. And that's all we need to do. That's our entry. All right, let's look at number 5. All right, number 5, it says that the company reports net income of 75,000. Its weighted average common shares outstanding are 19,000. It has no other stock outstanding. What is the earnings per share? All right, well, our formula is net income minus preferred stock or preferred dividends divided by common shares outstanding. All right, so they don't tell us any preferred dividends, so we assume it's 0. We have 75,000 minus 0 divided by the 19,000 that are outstanding. And we get an earnings per share of $3.95. All right, let's look at number 6. Number 6, it says the company has 5,000 shares of $100 par preferred stock and 50,000 shares of $10 par common stock outstanding. Its total stockholders' equity is $200,000. What is the book value per share? All right, so book value per share, we are taking the formula. We're looking at stockholders' equity. Oh, wrong one. Stockholders' equity that's applicable to common shares divided by the number of shares outstanding. But it says applicable to common shares, so we have to figure out what is the common stock equity. Common stock equity is calculated by taking our total equity and subtracting out any preferred equity. All right, so let's look at that. So we have preferred stock of 5,000 shares times a par value of $100 per share. So we have preferred stock of 500,000. So then we have to take our total equity minus our preferred. Our total equity was $2 million minus preferred of 500,000. And we get common stock equity of $1,500,000. Then we can do our formula. So we have the stockholders' equity applicable to common shares, which is $1,500,000, divided by the number of common shares outstanding. It tells us that we have 5,000 shares or 50,000 shares of common stock, so 50,000. We're going to divide that, and we're going to get a book value per share of $30. Okay, we're going to stop there, and we will continue 7 through 11 in part 2 of the review.